I wanted to point out that our following guest has already served a decade in the Idaho State Legislature, but then she left the legislature and actually went to work building a business and spent several years doing that. But her interest in serving the public didn't go away, has been there for a number of years, and she is one now of several candidates. I believe we have four who've announced for lieutenant governor on the Republican Party side of the line. And her campaign has been underway the last couple of months, and she's been on the road, if you will. Candidates, obviously, who are looking to get elected to office statewide in Idaho can easily put on 40,000 miles on the course of a year on a car or truck if they're actually out campaigning. 7 minutes after 9 o'clock, we're at 63. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And joining us this morning is Janice McGeachin. She is a resident of Idaho Falls. Welcome back to our show.
Well, thank you, Bill. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this morning and listen to some of the concerns in your community.
The last time we talked, you had considered running for a potentially another office, and then you decided at the time you still had, family issues and the like, and maybe being closer to home, Boise, let's say, versus Washington, would be a better idea right now. When you made the announcement, though, it can't be easy when you're running in such a crowded field.
Well, that's why I appreciate opportunities like today to just allow people to get to know me better. I've lived in Idaho for more than 40 years of my life, and so I know a lot about our state's history, and especially in my community, people know me, they know who I am, they know who my family is, but across the state, they don't. So this is really good for me to travel around the state and listen to people and talk to people, learn about what people's concerns are, and I'm really enjoying that.
There had been, of course, when you were serving in the legislature, you were quite well known because of some of your committee assignments, but you've, been away about 5 or 6 years now?
Yeah, it's been 5 years. I served for 10 years and term limited myself out. I was kind of at the top of the game. I was serving as the chair of the Health and Welfare Committee and served 4 years in the legislature on the Revenue and Tax Committee and 4 years on JFAC. And then I was chairing the Health Committee. But I really was trying to honor the will of the people in their view of term limits and not, believing that politicians shouldn't be there forever. For me, it's a public service thing to do, to go over and serve and do the best I can and weigh the issues. And then I decided it's time for me to go back home to my community and start up another new business. And that's what I did the last 5 years.
I stopped by, in fact, just to let people know, I stopped by one of your shops this past winter, and the one thing you were telling me was about your involvement in the Republican Party and hosting fundraisers and being involved for many, many years. But what strikes me is when I talk to Republicans in various current office holders or various Republicans on committees around the state, they try to label people or put them in a particular box. And a lot of them refer to you as being from the Tea Party wing or being attuned with this new Liberty Caucus that has suddenly arisen in Boise. Do you think that that's an accurate description?
Well, I certainly have a very conservative voting record and identify with those individuals that are more liberty-minded. I think it's unfortunate, like what you said, that we tend to put labels on people, because if you would just sit down and talk to someone face-to-face, we'll find that we have a lot more in common. We believe strongly in certain things, and it's kind of my belief in conservative principles is what has prompted me to get back involved in this process. Because as I look back the past 5 years, there's things that I am seeing happening even in our state level that cause me concern. And so, yes, I think it's important for all of us to be involved and do what we can and fight for the things that we believe in. But I don't think it's always fair to put labels on people. And we all tend to do that, but it's kind of what also I think maybe sometimes drives a divide between us when we're all members of the same community here in Idaho. We live in a great state. We have a proud, independent history, and there's people in this state that have some great ideas and want to help step forward and solve some of the challenges that we have in healthcare and education. We just need to allow the people to operate freely and help in the process to create some solutions to the challenges that we face. And that's what I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, our previous guest was Randy Staples from Idaho Weekly Briefing, and we got into a discussion about the governor's situation with his back surgery and the like, and the possibility that if he steps aside, obviously, the lieutenant governor moves into that role. So many people see, I think, that the job of lieutenant governor as being ceremonial, but Brad Little has had a lot of what you'd call activity just in the last few months, really, as acting governor and the like. Uh, uh, I think from that standpoint, the ceremonial part of it gets a lot of attention. But from an overall governing philosophy, since you would be in that sense a heartbeat away from the top job, uh, what would you tell the average voter? What's the elevator speech that you would give them?
Well, the role of the lieutenant governor, it's primarily they preside over the Senate while the legislator's in session, and yes, cast a deciding vote in the case of a tie. And if the governor ever has to step away, they're there. That's why I think it's important for people to know where that person stands on issues, important issues of taxation and spending. Someone who has a proven track record of where they're at on any given issue. But I think also the job of a lieutenant governor, a person can bring a lot to that position. And what I see is what I would love to be able to help bring to the job is one thing is just to educate more people, help to educate more people, especially our young people, about government and how their government operates. And, I think it would be so fun to travel around and go into schools and talk to students and teach them about our form of government that our founding fathers created and established for us. But the role of the lieutenant governor could also be real important for helping to develop, strong, solid principles for economic development in our state and make Idaho continue to be a great place to live and work and raise a family.
Speaking of that, on some of these big issues of the last legislative session, I know a lot of people out there, when we ended up going to the Garvey bonds to fund, because that, tell me, I'm not telling any tales out of school here, has been a huge issue for people driving roads in this part of the state over the last several months, especially after the winter. This whole notion that we borrowed a big chunk of that money against the expectation that we'll have federal money coming in. Was there a better way to go about doing this?
Well, first of all, I will say that, infrastructure is a very important role for government. And so we do need to make sure that we have good roads for our businesses and our farmers to be able to travel around and transport their goods. That's very important, and it's a good role, proper role of government. On any given issue, I don't like to commit to any position until I'm in that position and I understand where the revenues are coming in and weigh all the options. I am concerned, though, about our continued reliance on the federal government and the federal dollars, and that's one of there's three things that I've been talking to people around the state, and that's one of them is growing reliance on the federal dollars, the federal government. We have 35% of our state budget now is comprised of federal dollars, and when we have such a deficit, we have a big debt problem in our nation, $20 trillion of debt, with very low borrowing rates right now, the Federal Reserve. What's going to happen when those Federal Reserve rates start to climb back to normal rates of about 4%? Our borrowing costs will be 4 times higher than what they are today, which is $200 billion just to pay the interest on our national debt. So naturally, what's going to happen is that those dollars, even on a federal level, are going to start shrinking. And so, when the dollars shrink, and start coming away from our state, we need to be in a good position as much as possible to be able to sustain our economy without those dollars. And I believe it will happen. It's just a matter of time. And again, our 35% of our state budget is based on federal dollars, and so I'm concerned about growing that, and I think we need to be very careful and cautious.
Wanted to point out our guest is Janice McGeachin. She is a candidate for lieutenant governor, one of 4 Republicans looking at that seat. We're going to take a break in about 2 minutes, and then following the break, if you've got a comment or question, you can join us. But I do want to ask this. This one comes up because I know the 3 candidates. I got to hear all of them speak last week who are running for governor at an event. And my first inclination was, all right, these guys are none of them going to be spendthrifts elected. And when it comes to lieutenant governor as well, what really differentiates you from, let's say, Steve, Kelly, and Marv? Because I think that probably at the core, most of you are much alike when it comes to dollars and cents.
Well, as I said, I have a very solid, proven, conservative voting record. And I have spent 10 years in the legislature working with others in the legislature and building relationships with some of those legislators. And so that's what I feel like I can bring to the table is just, my track record, where I'm at on issues, the relationships that I've developed in the legislature, some experience working with some of the major departments in the state, the agencies, and just working to have, very good communication between the executive and the legislative branch of government so that we can work together to improve policies for the people of Idaho.
Do you think that the others, because I think that some of my radio audience feels some of the others are a little bit too tied to the establishment, whatever that may be. But do you think that you might be, of the 4, the most attuned just to the needs of the average people on the street?
I would say yes, because, again, I term limited myself out. I respected the will of the people, went back home, and remembering what it's like to be a working class citizen in our state, creating jobs, dealing with, all the regulations and the rules and the taxation that the legislature imposes on us. Yes, absolutely. I think that I am more in tune with the average person.
We've got a break in about 20 seconds, and we'll talk more after that. But before we get to the break, is there a website where you could send people if they have, more interest?
Yes, my website is www.janicemcgeachin.com, and that's JANICEMCGEACHIN, JaniceMcGeachin.com.
And that's a Scottish pronunciation, we should point out.
Yes.
That comes from a fellow whose mother's name was Gordon. We'll take a short break. We've got more with the candidate coming up in just a few minutes. We're about 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 62. Our guest is a candidate running for lieutenant governor in Idaho. She's one of 4 Republicans who have announced, and it is going to be an interesting, we're down to 10 months before the primary. And it is Idaho, so let's be honest. The winner of that primary is likely the next lieutenant governor. Janice McGeachin is joining us this morning. She is from Idaho Falls. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. We've got about 5 minutes left. I've got to ask you a quick question while you're with us, because we can talk a little bit about process. We can talk a little bit about some issues and the like. On the other hand, people in the early part of the game obviously would like to know a little bit more about the candidate. And I'm going to add that, Janice, you've been, or Mrs. McGeachin, whichever you prefer, you've done well to help put a lot of money into the state's skiing economy over the years. You're very active, and I know you've got a large family as well. Maybe you could tell people about that.
Absolutely, thank you. And as I said, I've lived in Idaho for more than 40 years of my life. My husband Jimmy and I, we've been married 30 years. He was my high school sweetheart, and we have 2 grown adult children, Liza and James. They're both helping us run our businesses in Idaho Falls and Boise. We have parts store and repair in Idaho Falls and Boise, and then we have a restaurant in Idaho Falls. And so both of our kids are actively helping us run the companies. And if I want to circle back to your question before the break about what sets me apart from some of my opponents.
Sure.
On the issue of taxation, I believe that we, the citizens of Idaho, deserve some tax relief. In this past legislative session, it came to us in the form of a grocery tax credit. And so as a lieutenant governor, I could play an integral role on what I wish we could have seen from our executive and legislative branch of government was, let's make sure that we get this tax relief to the people who need it and who deserve it, because we haven't seen the tax relief for many, many years. And so as a lieutenant governor, knowing how the process works, I would make that grocery tax repeal part of the going home bills to say, hey, this is the important bill that we're going to make sure it gets signed into law before we go home. And that could have been done. The other thing that could have been done in the form of tax relief, which would have been a big help to the business community, was the reduction in our state unemployment insurance rates. And we were due, as employees, that reduction because the money we were paying in, the fund was building at a level that it was higher than what was necessary. So nothing had to have been cut from the budget. It's just shrinking the rate that the business community gets taxed on. And for some reason, the good old boys over in Boise managed to cobble up that bill too. But I would have made sure that one was also part of the going home bill. And so I know how the system works. I know how to be strong and help put these policies into place for the people of Idaho that I know benefit them. And on any given issue, whether it's healthcare or education, knowing how, being involved in some of the efforts to break up the healthcare trifecta that's keeping insurance rates ridiculously expensive, there are solutions that people in Idaho, I have talked to them, and my door would be wide open to those people to come in and say, hey, let's talk and let's see what we can do to work together to have a better system. And I believe real strongly in the concept of developing better training and apprenticeship programs so that our young people, the veterans, even people coming out of our judicial system can receive better training, hands-on, skills-based training to go out and get jobs. There are many, many jobs that are available out there today that are good-paying jobs. So we're not training our people for those skills-based jobs. And I think there's just a lot of opportunity in these areas. We just need to have the right leadership in place.
I'm going to ask you if you can stick around through the next segment of the show as well, if you've got the time.
Sure.
Because we're going to try to squeeze a caller in here. We've only got about 90 seconds before the break, so it may take more time to answer any question or comment. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air with a candidate.
Well, quickly, you should run for Mike Simpson's office. And secondly, how do you feel about our national forests that are so mismanaged that when we burn out 160,000, 200,000 acres of forest, that'll never be the same? This to me is one of the most, should be a priority in Idaho, saving these national forests. I realize the feds are controlling this, but we've somehow got to get this under control before we lose so much of it that we'll never see it again. I'll hang out.
We got about a minute before the break. Go ahead.
I agree with the caller. I'm sorry to miss your name, but, I think that we need to be more engaged as a state to help manage our natural resources. And again, being a native person in Idaho, and I've spent lots of time hiking up in the mountains, and I can see all the wood that is just, I think, gosh, if this caught on fire, the whole mountain would be gone. But there's so much wood available. If there's a way we could harvest that and just allow families to use it to, for firewood to keep them warm during the winter, what a great concept. Why couldn't we think about doing more things like that?
We've got to take a short break. We're going to be spending some more time with Janice McGeachin. She is candidate for lieutenant governor in Idaho. And by the way, Representative, I think that's the second time I've heard somebody say, you should run for Congress. It's like an echo. Maybe another day. We've got more coming up with the candidate in just a few minutes. It's 9:30. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. We're at 62. We're going to spend a few more minutes today chatting with Janice McGeachin. She is one of 4 Republicans announced for lieutenant governor in Idaho. We're at 9:34 and at 61. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've got to ask the candidate again while she's here. For people who'd like to know more, obviously today everybody has a website set up. Where would people go to take a look at that?
Thank you, Bill. Again, my website is www.janicemcgeachin.com. And I'd love to have you go on to my website, learn a little bit more about me and the positions that I take, and offer some. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your concerns are.
We were talking off air, and a lot of people are looking at the political landscape, and you were obviously involved in the Trump campaign last year. For people who don't know that, you were actually in Cleveland at the convention, and you had an important role in the Trump campaign in Idaho. We are seeing a change going on in Republican Party politics, and I'm not even sure that some of the party leaders have even gotten a whiff of it, even though you would think it would have been so obvious with last year's presidential election. Do you get the same impression?
Yeah, and they have, some of our leaders seem to have so much disdain. Well, we actually have disdain for them because they're not being responsive to us and what we're saying and what our needs are. They're not solving any problems at all. We continue to go down this road of more and more debt, not dealing with health care, not dealing with taxes, not dealing with safe, legal immigration. It's just really disgusting, actually. I'm so fed up with Congress and Washington, D.C. and their inability to get anything done. And I think Congress's inability to act on anything is what is continuing to drive this deep divide down our country, because we're just getting so frustrated. Like I said, we're all citizens of this country, and when we sit down face to face and talk to each other, despite our differences, we can solve the many problems and challenges that we face. But when Congress, by their lack of leadership, not failing to act on anything, it's just creating this deeper and deeper divide, because we don't see that any of the things that we're screaming, small business is the heartbeat of America, but we're on life support right now.
Well, you bring up the inactivity. I was thinking about the inactivity this summer. Well, there was activity, but it was a failure on repealing and replacing Obamacare. Would we be better just turning all the issue like that over to the states and saying let the states come up with their own solution?
Absolutely. And as far as I understand, the skinny repeal and what the House proposed, it wasn't what I would have liked. I would like a straight repeal. Let's scrap everything and start all over again. But at least what I understand from the provisions, that's exactly what they were attempting to do, is take away all this control on the federal level and turn it back to the states. Let the states try to solve their own problems. And I believe that we can. I've talked to doctors in Southeast Idaho, doctors in North Idaho, business leaders, community leaders that have come together with some ideas to deal with, how to reduce healthcare costs. We just need the right leadership in place, and I believe Trump wants to give that authority back to the states to do that. And that's what our country, our form of government is based on, the states having a more sovereign authority. The roles that are given to the federal government in the Constitution are few and limited. And then all the other issues that we deal with, no matter which state you live in, were meant for us in the states to find the solutions to our own challenges.
Got about a minute left. Is there anything that I didn't bring up that you need to mention that would be important?
Well, I'm just really enjoying this opportunity to travel around the state. I really would like to encourage people to please reach out through my website, on my Facebook, message me. I want to listen to what your concerns are. I really believe in the will and ability of the people in Idaho. I want to hear what your concerns are, and as a leader, a servant leader, I would want to be the person that would help facilitate your ideas and your ability to create your own success and even your own failure. Sometimes that happens, but you know what? I believe in people. If they're going to fail, I believe that they have the ability to pick themselves up and try it again and be successful.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you much for your time. We've got to run today, but we look forward to speaking again, and I'm sure that when you're traveling through Twin Falls, we'd love to have you in the studio as well.
Great. Well, I've enjoyed the opportunity today and look forward to talking to you again soon, Bill.
All right. Thank you. Janice McGeachin joining us this morning. She is candidate for Lieutenant Governor, one of 4 candidates. She's from Idaho Falls, and spending a good part of the hour with us today, discussing her campaign and some of her views. It's 61 right now. We've got a short break, and then we're in the stretch run of today's show in just a few minutes.